real principal global investor in the real estate department, so I'm training for life insurance company in Japan. So we have a good relationship with my financial group, so I'm really excited about winter.
And you are one of how many interns of people from
we have 3 interns.
3 right now, and this program of 18 months has been going on for years, right? It's kind of a rotation, and we get a chance to meet lots of rising professionals. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is David Yoshimura. I'm actually from the area originally. I was born and raised in Waukee, Iowa. After graduating, I went and traveled to Japan, taught there with my wife for about 2 years, and then moved to Chicago to law school, and we came back here to Des Moines. Since we've been back here, I've joined the Iowa Asian Alliance on the board of directors. So I've been sort of working together with Jazzy and the IA, coordinating with them, and I've had an opportunity to meet some of you in that capacity. I also work at a law firm here in town called Baker Daniels. We're one of the few full-service international law firms in the city here, with actually a couple offices in the Asia area of the world, and trying to figure out how to sort of combine my interests with my profession, and I'd love to get to know more folks in the business area around here, and also part of this. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
I'm Corey Ann Harrigan. I'm a professor of English and the chair of the Department of English at Cincinnati College, just a little bit south of Des Moines. And I've had the privilege of working with Kiyo Matsuyama, and we are planning a May terms course to Japan in 2021, and I'm very honored to be here.
Perfect introduction, Kiyo.
Oh, okay, hey. My name is Kiyo Matsuyama. I'm really excited about this forum. And as I sort of seriously also we half joking, this is a pure adult entertainment. So, and with this form of the discussion and free talk, we like to give an understanding of the 2 different cultures. It's different, and a lot of things are the same, but we are different. And I hope that you can gain some understanding of how different they are, and also how we can get around each other. So then, this is a free talk time, and use the brain. There are no right or wrong answers. We need your imaginations, how you're thinking in the brain.
Great.
Please join this enjoyable discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Chuck.
Thanks, Carol. I'm Chuck Safaris. I serve in a position on Iowa Sister States. I'm the chair of the Yamanashi Committee, so I'm very pleased to be here.
I'm Heather Jones, and I'm also with Iowa Sister States. I got involved in Japan when I went on the Kofu Des Moines Exchange when I was 11 in 1996, and then I took Japanese from Sachiko Murphy at Central Academy, and then I went back to Japan, and I was there for a semester in college, and then I lived there for 4 years, and so Japan is my favorite place in the world besides Des Moines, Iowa.
Well, we're going to save you. Catherine.
Hi everyone, I'm Catherine over at the Iowa International Center. We do work in citizen diplomacy, so we bring in international visitors to Iowa, and then we also help refugees and immigrants.
I'm Nick Jones, not related to Heather Jones. CEO of Berkwood Farms. We are 100% farmer-owned co-op that raises 100% Berkshire Caribou pork. We primarily service domestic accounts, but we work with CK International doing more export. That's a small part of our business, but I'm here to learn more about the Japanese culture, meeting more of you, and seeing where us as a company can expand on the Japanese markets, domestic and also international. Okay.
Hi everybody, my name is Akira Hata. I'm a vice president of Old State Belting. Old State Belting is a conveyor belting distributor and service provider. And actually, I'm from Japanese trading company, Marubeni Corporation. and I'm here as a representative of shareholders. So before coming here, I was working for the Canadian conveyor belt distributor in Vancouver. So this is my 7th year in North America and 2nd year in Iowa. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Megan Ying. I am very honored to work with Nick Jones to bring wonderful Iowa Berkshire Ford to Japan, and we work with wonderful companies like Manahashi and Shinjin. And the good news for everybody here is starting next year, actually starting December, we'll be competing chashu for 1 year in Iowa. And so hopefully next time we can serve ramen at our
Sounds good to me.
And other than that, I work with leather business. We represent Hormel Foods, and we introduce pig skin all over the world. Not quite in Africa yet, but we do a lot of productions in Asia, Mexico, and also Europe. And here. Yeah.
Well, welcome everybody. I'm Phil Christensen. I'm served on the Yamanashi Sister State Committee for a number of years. I'm currently director of an international nonprofit based in Ames called Iowa Resource for International Service. We do peace building work around the world.
I'm Del Swat, Deb Christensen. I am an associate professor of biology at Drake University. I'm currently involved in establishing a travel abroad study partnership with art and bridging art and anatomy in Italy. And I would love to be able to develop a program that would allow us to bridge some sort of biological science somewhere in Japan as well. I think our students would love that. Thank you. So if anybody has ideas, come to me.
Derek, I think do you have anything more you want to say? We were introduced to you a little earlier. Okay, Cinda and Bob.
I'm Cindy Holst, and I'm currently with Muscatine Sister Cities, and sort of being the chair again of the County Science Exchange. Previously, 20 years ago, I was doing that as well as the chairman of the Iowa Sister State Yamanashi Committee before Chuck. And anyhow, we're back in Iowa, and it's really good to be back. We just moved back a year ago, so we've been 20 years away, and it's nice to come back where we actually have some international relations. Out in the west of Colorado, as far distant west, there's not a lot going on there, so this is really nice. And this is my husband, Rob.
Konnichiwa. Watashi wa Philip Bob this, and that's about all the Japanese can do. As Cindy said, I'm the spouse. She's hiding her light under a barrel. Cindy led a governor's conference to Japan in more than 20 years ago, and she's been very involved. We've had 30 Japanese homestay students, 25 over the years. Cindy's been to Japan either 9 or 10 times. You can't remember. It's been so many times. I spent 4 hours in Narita 50 years ago coming back from Vietnam, so that's my Japanese experience now. It's really great to see everybody here. And as Cindy mentioned, we just moved back from Grand Junction, Colorado, and if your skin is red out there from sunburn, you're kind of shoved off to the side. So it's kind of nice to be back with us, a real cultural maceration. We're both, I'm about ready to lose my voice too. Iowa natives. We've been here all of our lives except for 20 years in Colorado, and boy, it is really good to be back. I hope.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chinasada. I teach Japanese at Drake University. Drake University Japanese program is kind of small, but the students are doing great. And my coworkers and myself are trying to host a kind of Japan-related event. We name it the Sakura Festival. And one of the big events we hope would be planting a sakura trees on Drake campus. But we're having some financial trouble a little bit. I talked to a few of you now already here. But if you have any idea, especially like a finance help and how to plant sakura tree and everything, that would be great. Thank you.
We need support for the sponsorships for the trees.
Yes,
the cherry blossom trees.
yes.
Yes, wonderful.
I have some ideas for you.
Okay.
That's why we're doing this. Peter.
I'm Peter Kelly with the National Association of Japan American Societies in Washington, D.C. Japan American Society of Iowa is one of our 38 members, and it's a great pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Sherry.
My name is Sherry Gupta. I'm the founder and executive director of Culture All. It's an organization here locally helping Iowans accept and adapt to differences, and specifically cultural differences among the cultures who come here to Iowa so that we can build better community together. I did have the opportunity to spend just a few days in Japan and also benefited from having a JOI coordinator work with us for 2 years. And it was a wonderful experience and an honor to be here today.
New.
Good afternoon, New Nguyen, Executive Director for the Iowa Asian Alliance. We are 18 years old, and we serve as the larger umbrella for all the different diverse Asian American Pacific Islander groups that comes under the umbrella of IAA. But JASI, as you know, is one of the distinguished organizations that has been leading the way for many of the smaller Asian communities, and we are just honored to be here. Thank you.
My name is Yoshimi Tamura. I've been here 21 years, and during the day I work at the courthouse, and then besides that, Chie, the president, and I own a kimono shop. So if you need any kimono.
Dan?
Oh, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Clark. I'm originally from Des Moines, so also an Iowa native. And similar to the young lady back there, I also went to Kofu when I was 10 years old at Des Moines Public Schools. So that started an interest with Northeast Asia, really, in Japan more specifically. I speak Chinese. I'm trying to learn Japanese right now, so that's one of the reasons why I've been a Japan American Society of Iowa member now for about a year. But I'm currently working for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and I understand there is also an office in Japan, the Japan Intellectual Property Office, so hopefully I'll get a chance to work a little bit more with them in the future.
Thank you. And
Michelle.
the young lady behind that.
I feel like I just snuck in. Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Yoshimura Smith. I'm a community member here. I was born in Waukee and lived most of my life here in Des Moines. I am a volunteer with Iowa Asian Alliance and recently the Iowa Sister States. And I also have an interest in the pork trade between Iowa and Japan.
She's a bacon queen. I was going to say that. A title that you haven't shared yet.
And I'm the 2019 Bacon Queen.
Probably you've seen me already. My name is Chie Schiller. I'm the president of the Japan American Society of Iowa. I'm such an honor to have all of you here, and yeah, we'll have fun.
We will. We will indeed. A couple of announcements before I introduce our speaker. This session will be videotaped in case you saw the cameras over there. For purposes of JASI and for educational purposes by the Central Academy students. Thank you very much for doing this for us. I'm going to make the assumption that everyone is okay with being videotaped during this session. And please let Chia or Kyo know if you're not. Rest assured that this videotape will not be for general public distribution. It will not be sold for profit. Nor will it be posted on YouTube. It is for internal purposes only. So, for housekeeping purposes, the coffee and tea and water will remain there along with the snacks, and the restrooms are to the around the corner to the right there. You kind of make a U-turn out there. So, and we have two more students. Two students that I know Theo stepped out to join. Please introduce yourselves.
Hello everyone. I'm Toa, and I'm from Japan and Yamanashi Prefecture University, and we came here to exchange student, and we will stay 1 year. And right now, we learn English, so Nice to meet you guys.
Hello, my name is Ai Fukuda. I also from Japan, Yamanashi Prefecture, and I'm going to DMAC and learning English as the same. And today, thank you for giving this kind of opportunity for us. Nice to meet you.
For those that aren't familiar, DMAC is the Des Moines Area Community College, and there's been a long, years and years of an exchange program between DMAC and the University of Yamanashi for many, many years as a result of sister state activities. So thanks for joining us. Okay, introduce our speaker. Now there is a full bio in your packet, so I'm just going to do the Cliffs Notes version. We have today, we're very pleased to have today joining us from Chicago is Bob Tamaki, who is the managing principal of the Rumen Group, a brand strategy consulting firm. He is recognized as one of the nation's foremost authorities on Asian American marketing. He's the author of Many Cultures, One Market, a guide to understanding the Asian American consumer. And it's a definitive work on that subject. In addition, Bob is a professor of marketing at Northeastern Illinois University. And so his presentation will be about 45 minutes, and then we will be breaking up, not breaking up, not as a group. We're going to remain as a single group. You've heard that we have representation from business, from academia, as well as cultural groups. And we're going to discuss as one with general questions that are applicable to all audiences. Bob's going to give us a lot of food for thought, but the answers will come from the group for yourselves. What do you get from this presentation, and how can you take this home? And we're going to hope that as the day goes on and the discussions spark ideas in your heads, that you'll be able to share some of the thoughts before the end of the day. So with that, I turn the floor over to our speaker. Thank you very much. Bob, come on up.
Thank you. When Chia-san and I talked at the Contour General's Midwest Forum, when she asked me if I'd consider speaking, presenting research findings from the project, my first thought was that I might put people to sleep. First of all, because what I'm going to be showing today is an excerpt of a close to 500-page document. We're not going through 500 pages worth of stuff. However, if I see anybody nodding off since we just ate lunch, and so I'll know to cut things short. What I'm going to be talking about today is a psychographic profile of Midwestern attitudes toward Japan. This is really much simpler than it sounds. I am going to actually skip the background on me since Carol covered that, and there's some information in the packet. The one thing it is missing is I like to tell people that my real job is spy, but my wife really doesn't like me to say that. So I can't say that. So the first question is, why do research? Now, the main job of the consulate who commissioned this piece is to act as the interface between U.S. and Japan. In that regard, you really can't work with people you don't know. So as we go through this, please stop me if you have any questions. But the basic reason why we did this piece is I told them the U.S. is such a large and diverse country that Americans' attitudes and behaviors are relative to Japan vary greatly. Very different from the Midwest, from the East Coast, from the West Coast, and South. Demographic profiles, pretty easy to put together, but they really offer little to understand what people are actually thinking about. Now, this thinking might be limited to the perceptions that people have built up historically, determined by such attitudes between Japan and people, Japanese products, and consumption habits relative to all these kinds of variables. So what we want to do is provide some objective and subjective reasoning for discovering opportunities, because that's what we're really all here for. What kind of opportunities do we have? To influence, to persuade, to promote, and just as important, to figure out why some of the past efforts that the government of Japan did not work. Some of you might remember the whole Cool Japan evidently did, why it didn't work. So the key to discovery lies in what we call psychographic segmentation. We're going to get to do a better explanation of that. So, what do we know already? We want to check the work that my company does against what we're going to be doing in this research project. We've done a couple different things. There are historical representations that guide current attitudes about Japanese people. There's limited media representation. There are others actually working against a positive image, and there's really a lack of self-promotion. So what we find is that historically, older representations, most academics, the private sector, and even the general public would probably agree the historical representations of Japan in this country have been really pretty limited. So even more modern representations show a limited range of Japan's culture and people. This is what most people generally in this country think about Japan. And I would wager that more people in this country recognize Godzilla than recognize Shinzo Abe. So is that a concern? Maybe. If you're in that realm, maybe it is a concern. Last year's Hollywood Diversity Report done by UCLA indicates there's a very limited media representation. So it's really no wonder that most Americans have a limited view of what Japan is. Less than 4% of film roles went to any Asian actor, not just Japanese or Japanese American. Less than 5% of broadcast TV roles, less than 3% of cable TV roles. Surprisingly enough, maybe not if you watch a lot of YouTube, almost 5% of digital roles in the media feature Asian or Japanese American people. Now, all these references are compounded by the fact that there are those who actively work against promoting an accurate portrayal of Japan. The Chinese American protest at the Palo Alto High School that was going to be named for a Japanese American, Fred Yamamoto. They said, oh no, that's too close to, Admiral Yamamoto from World War II. No connection. The Korean American protest mural dedicated to actress Ava Gardner in the Coconut Grove nightclub. They said, no, that's too close to a Japanese imperial flag. Don't see it, but there you go. Comfort women statues around the country, and most recently, the South Korean complaint of Japanese military flag at the 2020 Olympics. So, hasn't even come up, and yet there are people working actively against some sort of positive image. So, with all this going on, what do we really want to get to? What really matters? It's not surprising that Bloomberg featured a piece earlier this year on why Japan still matters. Ultimately, this is partly about who controls what people think and know about Japan, its culture, its people, and how that resonates in the U.S. And hopefully by the end of this discussion, you'll kind of realize where this is all sitting. So the big question, who will decide? According to Bloomberg, why Japan still matters. Infrastructure, bullet trains, automotive robotics industry, most of the kinds of things that on a day-to-day basis we're a little bit closer to than some of the social and cultural issues. So let's talk about what we actually did. The research was done in 3 phases. Stage 1 is quantitative, it's an online survey. It's a representative projectable sample in the 10-state region Consulate General of Japan Chicago covers. It's matched demographic to the region, so we match by gender, education, and income, race, all those different kinds of measures. We had a number of different areas of exploration, which I'll go into in just a minute. Second stage, we took this information, analyzed the survey, and developed what we call a segmentation strategy. And finally, a qualitative section to get some subjective reactions to online focus groups. So, first stage, quantitative online panel. The way this worked is consumers responded to a number of different questions, and they did this in exchange for donations to their favorite charities. This is typically how this sort of survey is done these days. We restricted it to the respondents in the consular region, and we had to make quotas for each state to make sure each state was represented equally. Not equally, but proportionally. So the question is, why do we do this online? Well, for those of you who still have a landline phone in your house and still receive the annoying messages from solicitors like me who want to get information from you, even though that business has been in place for over the last 50 years, it's really going away. All marketing research is really moving toward online kind of data collection. So here's where we sampled. We looked at Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, and North Dakota. We actually had to what's called oversampling in North and South Dakota because there's so few people there. We wanted to get a good representation of how things split up within the 10-state region, make sure they were equally represented according to the percent of population they had, and to get that number of specific profiles per state. So, following that, analysis and segmentation. What do we do with all this information? We start splitting things into groups. Demographic profile, we got a good idea of who all these people were in terms of gender, age, education. We started getting a real good idea of what their attitudes and belief systems were. So looking at these people, what we call behavioral indicators, which I'm going to go into a little more depth in a minute. What's their affinity toward Japan? Do they buy products? Do they consume food and beverages? What is their knowledge of Japanese or Japanese American culture, and how do they interact with that? And then finally, media consumption. How do they learn about Japanese, Japan, Japanese things, Japanese people? Is there a difference, and if so, what is that difference? So I'm going to get through this. This is actually the boring part. This is just how we get stuff. The segmentation is based on baseline sampling. So we took those 950 people from around the Midwest region, and we developed what are called correlation matrices to determine segments of people and how they start to think about Japan. Once identified, will be displayed on a correspondence analysis map, and you don't have to know that that's too much statistics for anybody to really think about on a Saturday morning. But the information marked respondents, followed by the sorting you saw on the last page, starts to give us an idea of how do we split all these people up in the Midwest into sort of like-minded groups in order to be able to address them in a similar fashion. Following that, we did two 90-minute focus groups. And these are really designed to give us some color to the information we saw. And focus groups being a qualitative kind of research method are directional, they can point the way, but we don't count on these to give us definitive answers or anything. It's really more for color and shape for the kind of information that we find. So now, what did we end up finding from all of this? So our primary goal is to think about who are the people in the 10-state Midwest region. What do they look like? What do they know about Japan and Japanese things? How do they feel about Japan and Japanese things? And then gathering them in a fashion where the results are not only quantifiable, but they're projectable as well. We want to make sure that we're not just talking to this group of people and they don't represent everybody in the region, because that doesn't really do as much good. So, first stage is the online panel. What did we find out? Well, we know there's significant contact with Japan and Japanese things through direct investment alone. I mean, from the companies we have here from Japan, every state in the Midwest region, to one degree or another, has Japanese contact. And that mostly has been a very positive kind of reaction within each state. Now, the areas of exploration, we gathered 8 different subject areas in the state, and I'll be going through each of these individually. Word association, admiration for Japan, Japanese products, attitude, and so on. So the first exercise that we ask people to do are what we call word equity association. And a word equity association is basically a quick question of when somebody says Japan or Japanese people or Japanese things, what do you think about? Give me the first 3 words you think about. What we do from there is we put them all together and we mush them up on our computer and we sort them according to how often someone says them, what degree they say them, how strongly they say them. And what we find out is we use a tool called a word cloud. And this word cloud shows us visually what people have said. So if you look at this chart, the 3 things, the 3 ideas that came up the most strongly, 3 words that came up the most strongly are sushi, honor, and technology. So when we ask people, what do you think of when you think of Japan? this is what popped up the most. Before he left for back to Japan, Consul General Ito loved using this in his speeches. I think after the research is done, he uses it in every single speech I heard him make until he left. I said, you're maybe using it a little bit too much, but this gives you a pretty good idea of generally what the people in Japan are thinking about when they think about Japan. The interesting thing is, we captured over 2,500 different words or references when we asked people what they thought about Japan. And what we see is that only 11% of the words people gave forward had any kind of negative connotation at all. So 87% were positive. Only 11% were any kind of negative. And that's going to be significant in just a minute. Where it pops up most, this is kind of difficult to read since the type is so small. But we look at admiration for Japan. The things that pop up the most are culture, food, a general experience, products, and traditional values. Japanese products, not surprisingly, are ubiquitous. We thought they would be a little bit less so in states outside of Illinois. Not so. If you look at Japanese products like TVs, any kind of electronic equipment, automobiles, musical instruments, they were not only all there, but they were considered the top of what people could buy. Japan-related activities and interest. Engagement, not surprisingly, is very, very low. And that's just engagement in going to events or festivals, that sort of thing, because you're looking at the entire populace. You're not just looking at people who are most interested in Japan-related things. Attitudes for Japan. You look at what we call the top two boxes. Do you agree, or do you strongly agree, or somewhat agree with following statements? Japan businesses provide jobs and contribute to the local economy, 33%. Japan and Japanese things are very cool, 52%. Japan promotes freedom, democracy, human rights, rule of law around the world, 27%. That was the consulate Mavis asked that question. That's not a normal Japan is one of America's strongest allies, 44%. Japan has fair trade policy with the U.S., 30%. Hopefully with the new U.S.-Japan trade agreement, that's actually going to go up. Japan is our most trusted trade partner in Asia, 56%. And this is significant because we also ask this question in conjunction with questions about China and Korea. So if you look at the number for China, only 5%. If you look at the number for Korea, only 9%. So significant difference in what people think about as far as who is our principal trade partner in Asia. News and information. Again, not many people get information about Japan because they really don't seek it out. Travel to Japan, not many people go to Japan. We're trying to work on it. And Japanese domestic and foreign policy, again, this is a government question because no one really looks into domestic and foreign policy. But a surprising number, 27%, said they are very somewhat knowledgeable about government policy. So again, we have all this stuff. What do we do with it? That's where we get into stage 2, our segmentation. This is taking that demographic profile, understanding of who people are, where they live, how much they make, what their education is like, and combining these attitudes, these word equity associations, and then trying to figure out how to get these things into groups. Here's what we found. We have a segmentation of 4 basic groups. 27% are what we call knowledgeables. These are people who say they not only know about Japan and Japan things and they're fans of Japan and Japan culture, they claim they also know a little bit about foreign and domestic policy and trade information, things like that. Number might be a little bit inflated based on what we actually know about what people know about, but this is a self-identification. These are people who said, yes, we know about those things. Next group, 23%, aspirers. They are all, again, very positive on Japan, Japan culture, want to travel there. They just have not gotten there yet. So mostly younger people, most of them have an interest in culture. They just haven't developed what they're going to be doing yet. The largest group, just like any research function, are what we call everyone else, because the general populace is only targeted toward any specific subject by a small group. So the fact that less than half of this is everyone else is pretty good. The great thing here is that we have only 6% of what we would call the negatives. And the negatives are those people who say, don't know about Japan, don't want to know Japan, don't like Japan, whatever the reason. Put them in this category. So the way we're splitting up is not only do people know about it and claim they have some knowledge about a specific category, but what we're going to do is apply this to who we can talk to later and see how it all is starting to make sense, sort of. Third step, we took the two groups, the knowledgeable, the people who said they knew about Japan and added additional foreign policy information, and the admirers, people who want to get to know more about Japan, said we need to do some qualitative research. So for those of you unfamiliar with focus groups, it's simply a gathering of people screened for this sort of background, and we discuss a particular topic. So for the knowledgeable aspirers group, we asked them, how knowledgeable would you say you were about Japanese government, their domestic and foreign policy? If they answered that one alone, they got into it. Everyone else had answered positively to, I admire Japan, Japanese people, Japanese culture, food, Japanese made products. So we made sure that everybody was appropriate for the discussion. We did this all online again because that's the way we do it now. 9 respondents in the first group, 2 from Illinois, 2 from Indiana, 1 each from Minnesota, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, and Iowa. And then the second group, 2 from Minnesota, 1 each from Illinois, Iowa, Dakotas, and Wisconsin. So here's what the groups look like. This is what actually how we do. We do real-time online. Everybody's on the screen at the same time. We can all hear each other talking. So that's the knowledgeable group. And here's the aspirers group. And as with this initial phase, this is really the only way to bring people together from across like a big geographic area. Now, I don't know if you know it or not, but the geographic area that the Consulate General of Chicago covers is the largest geography in the country. You know, when we think that the West Coast is, California itself is split up into 2 regions, so we have the largest geography to cover of anyone in the country. So what have we learned from these folks, in addition to the fact that they're already admirers and interested in Japanese things? From this knowledgeable group, this is even harder for me. They all strongly agree that they're admirers of Japanese things. They say Japan has a lot to admire. They have strong cultural values. They have experience of Japanese people. But the verbatim comments are really the most interesting part of this whole thing. Some people said, I lived in Japan for 8 weeks when I was in high school. There isn't a day go by that I don't think about being back in Japan. I've had the privilege of visiting Japan, and the culture was so ancient, so intriguing. The people were quiet and polite. Here's my feeble attempt to write haiku. They actually tried to do that immediately online to try to show how much they enjoy Japan. Japanese people inspire me to do my best and strive for perfection. They have an unbroken imperial line, and I like the 3, but they need to spend more on defense. Sushi, but they need to spend less on defense. So some things like that, but a little bit different from what our aspirers group told us. Their verbatim comments include things like, I got into Japanese culture in my late teens, early 20s, like a lot of people my age. I dug the art, and they were so experimental and free versus stodgy American culture. Their respect for tradition, there's always something new they've created. My background is in manufacturing and engineering. I drive a Toyota. I work with quality systems every day. All these things are Japanese in origin, essentially. My grandmother's Japanese. I've owned Japanese branded autos for 40 years. I enjoy Japanese cuisine. I enjoy reading Japanese literature. Japanese culture is fascinating, including Buddhism, art, media, marketing, technology. So we've got a lot of stuff from a lot of people, whether it's demographic profiles or a number of different attitudes or this whole segmentation scheme of how do we put these people in groups. But what we tell folks is that all this is meaningless until you figure out what the heck are we going to do with all this stuff. So hopefully that'll become much more clear in the next couple of pages. In consumer segmentation, the research indicates a huge acceptability rating for Japanese things. There are very few products in this country, consumer products especially, that enjoy such a high rating. With only 6% of the population being negative on this, that's an incredible kind of number. There is little waste then in communicating to a broader, deeper audience for events and ideas. Traditionally, in Chicago anyway, we tend to talk to the same people over and over again when we have a festival. We say, we reach the usual suspects. Should we be doing a whole lot more? There is an audience that is ready and willing to receive a message. Shouldn't we be talking to them? Second, insights in perceptions and attitudes toward Japan. Of the few negatives associated with anything in Japan, Japanese culture, Japanese people, most of these are associated to World War II. Other negatives really minor in the media landscape. Some things on whaling, nuclear power and such. For good or for bad, what's happening is those negative responses are tied to World War II. And because of that, those with wartime experiences are passing away. So a small minority of consumers are tied to other issues. What consumers told us is that even people who are 40 years old said, I'm 40, I wasn't around during the war, I have no connection with the war. I'm all about the positive things that we've seen with the U.S. and Japan since I've been alive. So the issues tied to these groups are perhaps addressed by a strategy of inaction as far as those who have any kind of negatives. Many media companies have a strategy. Well, if there's a negative reaction, we need to go head on with them and fight them and comment on everything they do. Sometimes it's better not to do anything, especially since the number here is so small. More perceptions and attitudes. The positive perception and attitudes are not only very positive, they are universally positive. And when we talk about universally positive, we talk about quality products, strong cultural values, cultural recognition. So it's possible that you can tie together multiple positive attitude variables about Japan. Quality products comes from quality, positive work ethic. Technological is tied to cultural values, food and family, to multiple audiences in every arena. So the question is, are you taking advantage of multiple universal perceptions in talking about the events and projects you're having? So getting a little bit more into what I do specifically is brand positioning. I mentioned before the Cool Japan strategy. Cool Japan was a project that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and some others did going on 20 years ago now. And the problem was that did not work. The whole notion of Cool Japan, if you think about it, you can kind of picture it in your mind, any messages coming from Japan. The imagery of beautiful countryside, a geisha standing on a bridge with her umbrella, that was what was getting sent out of Japan at that time. And it never worked because even then, people were starting to have different impressions about what Japan was and how to think about it. Culture and values associated with them is cool, but the evidence that they want to see is modern. Technology, music, fashion, robots, food. If any of you have been to Tokyo and been to a place called Robot Bar, it will blow your mind on how crazy tech, super high, robot-y the whole place is. And that's the kind of place Americans want to see. We're going to get a little bit more of that in just a minute. So there's an opportunity to increase the number of Japan fans just by focusing on what they want to hear, to develop their personal relationship by what's already there in their culture. discussing new imagery? Are you showing new imagery? Based on what I see outside in the lobby, I would say yes. Certainly we have traditional music and kimono and things like that. But there's also people doing Gundam, if you know what they are. They're doing robots and things like that. So, interesting mix, which we're going to touch on in just a second. More insights. Most of the older perceptions of Japan, geisha, traditional food, arts, have been historically shaped by American mass media without any guidance from Japan or Japanese Americans or organizations like the Funerals. They picked up on and they basically said, here's what it is. Younger people, and I would consider younger anybody at this point under 35, have discovered their own Japan image. They have their own idea of what Japan is in their head, and that's been shaped by very specific activities, mostly video games, anime, manga. And that is their Japan to them. It's not the old understanding of what Japan is. So Japan has allowed or reinforced this classic perception of Japan to continue at the expense of current desired brand position. So can you take advantage of this opportunity to add relevance without already harming the positive attitudes toward those historical perceptions? And I would say yes. Warren Randy. Japan is unique in the world. We did some side research and tried to find out if this was actually true. We haven't found anyone who disagree with this yet. There is a seamless blending of ancient culture and ultra-modern. And keep recurring. Japan's in an exclusive position to, amongst all nations that we can find anyway, to promote this all positive, unique selling point for food, culture, and technology in its place in the world. There's almost no other place in the world you will travel to where you find ultra high tech right next to a 1,000-year-old temple. It just does not exist. And people tell us that's half the reason why they go there. Is it possible for you to exploit this best of both worlds strategy? We certainly think so, but does it fit in with what you're doing in your own programs? One's a little more difficult, and I'm actually glad that there's some folks from the Iowa Asian Alliance here. Because unfortunately, more so in the Midwest than on either the East Coast or West Coast, people often cannot or do not discern the differences between Japanese and Japanese Americans, and often all Asians or Asian Americans. So there is certainly a difference that you need to make absolutely clear in your discussions. Since perceptions of Japan are fairly already virtually all positive, there's it's arguable whether there's anything to gain about tying it to other Asian cultures. But that's certainly a thing to do if you're in an environment where that is a positive thing already, as it seems to be here in Iowa. Can you identify the educational opportunities on the uniqueness of Japanese culture in relationship with Japanese Americans? One of the things that the consulate in Chicago has found out was that their strongest allies for Japan happen to be Japanese Americans. And it's taken years and years, but they finally realized, yeah, we should be coming back together at some point. 7-year separation is long enough. Events and activities, which I'm sure that most of you are interested in. Outside of the major metro areas, outside of Milwaukee, Chicago, St. Louis, and others, people are starved for any connection with Japan they can get. Virtually any event, activity, with the right planning, which in my mind means the right communication, talking to enough people just to let people know what's going on, is almost certainly to be well received. Now, what you have to consider here, one thing that will probably help with some of the planning, is calculating a return on investment for supporting your events. Can you develop an outreach program that not only lets you take advantage of resources outside your area, but also make sure that whatever you're doing in your specific area gets to enough people that, yeah, this is worthwhile. If we get only the people who are interested that we know, small group, we get anybody interested, much larger group. One of the things that Carol and I were talking about earlier was the fact that the Midwest, because we're so geographically spread, we almost have to work together. It's easy in LA to find lots of resources, easy in San Francisco, easy in New York. But certainly in Chicago, if you need some resources from Chicago, happy to help. We've different organizations, whether it's with martial arts, or flower arranging, or any number of different things. We travel to Milwaukee, we travel to St. Louis, we travel to Indianapolis. I like to think of the Midwest more as one big geography as opposed to isolated groups. So, in the Midwest, and particularly once you get outside Chicago, unlike the West Coast in New York, there's a little opportunity for everyday or widespread interaction with Japan-related activities and people, whether it's restaurants or festivals, theater, or friends. People laugh at me now when I say this, but it wasn't so long ago that I could walk down the street, downtown Chicago, and not see another Asian face all day. It's getting better. It's still not LA. It's still not New York. And I imagine outside of Chicago, it's even more so. So because of that, you almost have to invent ways to communicate outside your own little cluster group. Can you turn a traditionally neighborhood or organizational event to a citywide event? You know, I was happy to see the mayor here in that one of the things we found, even in Chicago, to convert a little neighborhood festival into a city event, you almost have to get the local government involved and supporting them. You know, can we use the city park? Can we use clothes off the street? Can we do these kinds of things? And in our experience around the Midwest, definitely very successful. So I hope it can be here as well. Something a little bit more difficult. One of the things the Aspirers told us is that they want more of an immersive experience when they do Japanese things. One of the nice things about what you've got set up here now is you touch on culture, you touch on martial arts, you touch on Gundam, you touch on a number of different things. And that's really what they're looking for. In many places, like Los Angeles, they can successfully hold a ramen festival, where all they talk about is ramen. All they serve is ramen, nothing else involved. Difficult to do here, because while there be enough people who are interested, people want other things too. And there's so many fewer opportunities to do those other things. We find it really helps to get everybody together. Now, it's highly unlikely that any place in this country you are going to see a new Japantown. There used to be Japantowns all over the West Coast. There's now San Francisco, Japantown, LA, Tokyo, sort of Seattle in the National District, not really, sort of San Jose. But we are never going to see a Chinatown parallel. But what we can do, we found out that particularly with government and private sector support, there can be little cultural zones, if you will. Has anyone been to Denver for the Sakura Square area? And that was all done with private investment and support of government and nonprofit organizations. So it's not a Japantown, but at least it's a sort of cultural zone that everybody knows they can go to when that sort of thing happens. Here's one I don't know how much you knew in this area specifically now, but I know certainly folks I've talked to in St. Louis and in Wisconsin and Nebraska would agree with this. The Japan-related sites, particularly gardens, are really, really underutilized. Is there a Japanese garden in Des Moines or near Des Moines?
No.
Where's
It's just by the Capitol where we have the bell there.
Okay. Even then, I think there are great opportunities to tie in an event or tie in an activity in those specific areas. You know, as we've seen from the last slide about this coming together, every element we can on culture kind of builds on each other. So can you actively support multiple use opportunities for established Japan-related sites to kind of maximize what's going on? One of my favorite ones, food. Sushi is clearly the most recognized food product originating from Japan. If you don't know this already, in this country, and especially in the Midwest, the largest seller of sushi is grocery stores. It's not restaurants, it's not caterers, it's grocery stores. So what we have, since the distribution goes in grocery stores, if you look on the right, that is real edomazushi, real Japanese sushi. On the left is grocery store sushi. I would advise most people to hesitate before you buy it, not knowing what's in it. Even in smaller markets, you know, the people we've talked to in North Dakota said, we go to the supermarket to buy sushi. You go to a restaurant once in a while, but we mostly go to the grocery store. And I did a quick, but that was a different story. So, do you know the term inchiki? It means kind of fake. So you balance real versus fake. But what you can do is, again, you can control that. There is an existing certification in Japan that's very similar to the French, and I'm going to butcher this, Appellation d'origine contrôlée, and the same thing in India, the Denomination d'origine controllata, which means it's a certified product. If you buy hams from Spain, they are stamped with this designation. If you buy wines from France, they are stamped with this designation. Cheeses from Italy, they are stamped with this information. And that's really because those specific countries are looking at their food as soft power. They are looking at it, this is a national treasure that we need to control. So is there a way to do that in the United States? Don't know. If we sell, is Nick still here? More Kurabuta Berkshire pork?
Yeah, he left, but I'm still here.
Maybe there's a way to do that here. But certainly there lends a badge of authenticity when you do that. Again, one does exist in Japan, no one uses it. Ownership of durable goods is ubiquitous, especially automobiles. And Japanese cars are widely considered best in class. The perception that some of you might have grown up with, particularly in the late 50s, 1960s, at that time period, made in Japan was a bad word. Made in Japan meant cheap junk. Now, made in Japan, that's the best you can get. It's right up there with made in Germany. Unfortunately, made in China now seems to be getting more the connotation that Japan had in the 60s. But are you taking the advantage of opportunities for entry for Japanese manufactured products, especially, particularly SMEs in this area? The explosion of small and medium enterprises wanting to get in the U.S., especially in the Midwest, it has been phenomenal. It seems the barrier to entry here is very, very low, not just culturally, but also legally. So certainly an opportunity for growth in areas like this. A little side note, for those of you who remember when Kikkoman first opened up a factory in Walworth, Wisconsin, the town was very, very, very dead set against Kikkoman opening up a factory. They said they're going to pollute the area. You know, we are a wild natural zone. They're going to pollute the skies. They're going to ruin the water table. What it really was an ethnic issue. They did not want a Japanese company to open when it opened. Now, Walworth could not do the Kikkoman. Kikkoman has donated, I think, something like $750,000 to the Walworth County school system. They employ a significant proportion of the town. The conversations I've had with Kikkoman factory workers that said, we love it. You know, we could not see working anyplace else. So huge difference from initial thoughts. But this whole made in Japan thing is a very different reception now than it ever was before. Here we start talking about some younger people. Soft power products, especially anime and manga, video games, music, and fashion, have become what we call a natural part of young America's acculturation. In talking to different people, they say, yeah, we discovered eating sushi. Okay, fine. You discovered it when you were 48 years old. You love it? Great. Oh, we want to travel to Japan because we've learned so much about it. When we talk to younger people, we say, do you think about anime and video games as Japanese? No, I grew up with them. I've been playing video games, since I was a little kid. This is American. So they have convinced themselves that these very Japanese kinds of products, these very Japanese cultural icons, are a natural part of what their life is because they grew up living them. So they don't see this as a foreign product. So are you taking advantage of these youth-oriented products to import the culture? Because it may be a far stretch for someone in their 60s or 70s to understand all the different characters, to understand Gundam. Is it different for somebody in their 20s? Not at all. It's a different kind of situation. One of the goals for the government, especially next year with the 2020 Olympics, is to increase travel. There is exceptionally high interest, but low experience of travel to Japan by Americans. Perceived and very real high cost to travel there, principally the airlines. Once you're there, it's not as outrageous as people think. One of the other problems we have, though, is a limited number of passport holders. Across the U.S., I don't know if you know this, but only 30% of Americans hold a passport. So when you look at that, it's even less in the Midwest. So if we're looking in the 20-ish figure for people in the Midwest holding a passport, then narrowing that down to people who are interested in Asia versus Europe or South America or Africa, then narrow it down even more to those who are interested specifically in Japan, you get to a real small number. So anything that promotes international travel is going to be good for promoting travel all over the world. Japan has never had a good bang for the buck kind of description, because most people you talk to say, go to Japan, it costs a fortune, it costs a lot. Airlines, despite my friends at ANA and JAL, I would agree. But once you're there, do people know about the hotels and restaurants and tours? When you compare side to side, not that expensive, particularly if you compare them London, Paris, Rome, typical places where most Americans go on the first trip. Is there a way for the travel industry to make it easier for people to understand what travel is really like? This desire for travel in Japan is driven more than just the historical imagery. And this came mostly from the younger folks. Yes, everybody wants to see Mount Fuji, everybody wants to see a geisha, everybody wants to see a temple. But everybody also wants to see robots. They also want to ride the Shinkansen. They also want to go to Akihabara. All of these places that don't get as much attention as the traditional classical view of Japan are really what more and more people want to see. I mean, once you've ridden, of those who've been in Japan, they would have ridden the Shinkansen. Once you ride the Shinkansen, it will spoil you for trains all over the world. You never want to ride any place else. But again, can you communicate these ideas to your travel industry or to those people who are traveling from your area? Can you tell them to talk about Skytree as much about Kinkakuji? You know, people want to visit the classic places. They also want to go to the other places. Here's where things got a little iffy with our friends at the consulate. We talk about domestic and foreign policy. Some good, some bad. Japan is recognized as the best friend in East Asia, as an ally, trading partner and contributor to science and technology. All terrific stuff. There's much more limited understanding of the importance to a global economy, which is not surprising because most Americans in general don't really understand a global economy. But one of the things that we can use this for is the fact that this can be used as a separator, not to separate Asian Americans, because in here we all got to come together. But in Asia, this can be used as a separator amongst nations, because we find many Americans are still confused about Japan, China, Korea, what's the difference? Yes, even to this day, people still are saying things like that. We can develop a best friend or most important ally sort of position, particularly with the trade agreement that was just done this last month between Japan and the U.S., particularly in areas like this where agriculture is so heavy. Another little side note, one of the things that we witnessed was after the trade deal was signed, almost every governor in the 10-state region came out with a statement saying, this is a good thing. This is going to help our agricultural industry. This is going to help everyone. Japan will benefit, we will benefit. The positioning was very, very different depending upon what state you were in, depending upon the tone that the individual governor wanted to project. Some were saying, this is a win-win. This is great. I mean, we finally got that stuff in the past. Japan's going to win. We're going to win. Everybody's great. Some were positioning like we won the trade war. You know, we finally get to deal on an even field. Now, whether you believe that or not, that's a significant difference in the kind of tone people are projecting when they talk about the relationship. So, is the trade agreement good for everybody, or is it we won? And that's, I'm not going to go into who said what, but different governors respond in different kinds of ways. Now, communication strategy. How do you start doing all this? There's a huge difference in those who obtain information on Japan-related news, information, and culture. Some people absorb information. They just hear it and they get it. Some people actively seek. For many community-based organizations especially, it's a very, very different proposal to say, we're having a festival, come if you want. Versus, we would like you to come. We invite you to come. We would be happy if you came and joined us and became part of our community. Very different kind of tonal reaction. It's very much more of an active voice than a passive voice. And part of this is cultural. Culturally in Japan, people are supposed to recognize this is a good thing, we're going to buy a good thing. Not necessarily the case here. There needs to be a little more prodding, a little more poking, a little saying, this is a really cool thing, come out and do it. Now, coupled with this is another, not so interesting, but certainly should be obvious, is the fact that younger consumers tend to be much more active searchers of news and information. Much, much more so. Older consumers tend to be much more passive. We tend to get our information from TV, from radio, from newspapers. Younger consumers tend to look for things specifically, and Japan-related events and activities tend to be under-promoted to specific audiences. So, if you don't know what the 3 logos there are down at the bottom, and you have a communication plan that's trying to reach young people, you really need to figure that out fast. In fact, the one on the left, maybe not so much anymore, because younger people are dropping off Facebook. In fact, the largest growth area for Facebook are people in their 50s. So we're finally catching on. But does that mean you need to re-examine your media strategy for event-specific opportunities? The Japan Festival we just had in Chicago, the second one actually, it's called the Kizuki Matsuri, was only advertised and communicated via social media, no newspaper, no radio, no TV. And over the 2.5-day period, there were over 20,000 people. And for someone who grew up in the advertising world where mass media is everything, I said, this is great. We didn't spend a dime on newspaper ads or TV time or radio ads. This was all done purely on social media. So incredible turnout. Another communications strategy. One of the things that when I give talks like this, I say, because the fact that you're here, you are probably already an ambassador for Japan and Japanese culture and Japanese people and Japanese things. The strongest driver in anyone's consideration of attending an event, traveling, going activity, is what we call the smart friend. If you're buying a computer, yeah, I know this guy, he knows more about computers than I do. I'm going to call him first and find out what computer I should buy. It's that kind of thing with cultural events as well. If Japan fans have a good experience with an event, they'll tell other people. The use of non-Japanese brand ambassadors has been hugely successful in this country. If you look at what Suntory Beam is doing with their whole promotional events, using non-Japanese people to promote purely Japanese products. If you look at what Kikkoman is doing to promote their products, tremendously successful. So the roles of these non-Japanese ambassadors can be a critical part in your event, in your program, in your organization, in anything you want to do. Because we're in the Midwest, the reaction we're getting is that it's much more coming from a friend than it is from a foreigner. And that sounds like a little crazy idea because the new foreign comes to begin with. But there does seem to be a very strong cultural element here. So, big question, what's next? So no matter if you're from academia or the private sector or nonprofits or government, you all have an interest in supporting U.S.-Japan relations in some form or another. I hope the information you presented and I hope the discussion that Carol's going to help lead will help you make that happen. Because honestly, from here on, the rest is up to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. That was a lot of information. I feel like I had a fire hose of ideas and information. I've jotted some notes. I hope some of you as well have. So where do we go with all of this information? And, first of all, does anyone have any specific questions for Bob? And he'll be here, so you might think of a question as topics come up. But any off the top? Yes, Eric.
Excuse me. One of the questions I have is, it's been mentioned that oftentimes things can be confused, especially with products, of what is Japanese, what is Korean, what is Chinese.
Yep.
A lot of things are coming from Vietnam as well.
Yep.
Has there been any push from Japanese companies to separate themselves from them? You see Lexus, for example. Lexus is a really well-known car. Everybody loves Lexus. Branch of Toyota. I don't know if people necessarily know that the Korean brands are different from the Japanese brands. And has there been a push to say we are different?
Not on the part of Japan, it's not that we see. There's actually been more of a push on the part of Korea to become more similar. Hyundai, for example, has divested the Hyundai name from their Genesis line. They're just calling it Genesis now. So Toyota, Lexus, Hyundai, Genesis. Because when the Genesis line, they saw the success of Lexus and Infiniti and Acura in Japan and in the US. So we're going to do the same thing. Unfortunately, this is just my opinion, but this is based on doing this for the past 35 years. Japan has the best products, they have the best engineering, they have the best distribution system in Japan, they have the worst marketing in this country. There's very little notion as to what they should be doing or how they should be doing it. If you're familiar with Mitsuwa grocery store, Wajimaya, places like that, any item coming from Japan has to have a USDA food label on it. That's the law. They can't sell in this country unless they have a label. That's the only thing they put on it. Do they put other information about what this is or how to put it to a non-Japanese audience? No, they don't. And in fact, Japanese meat laws actually are more stringent than USDA laws. They could say that right on the package. They could say, USDA, yeah, we're even more, so we're even more careful. Do they do that? Generally.
Just one little subject. I do want to say also I have a friend who was checking out contacts, and he was trying to decide what brand to use for contacts. He recognized that one of them had Japanese writing on it, and he went for that brand because he figured it has Japanese on it, it must be better.
Well, in that whole category, if you look now at Zenni or Glasses USA, inexpensive, high quality, quick turnaround eyeglasses, Japan's been doing that for 40 years. So it's nothing new, it's just new here. But no one in Japan is saying anything about it.
I just got these from Jin's last month, and they took me 30 minutes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to make a comment of what Derek said about label in Japanese, you have to be very careful because most Asians know that, so they put Japanese on their label too. Yes. Really? Yes. A lot of Chinese products will have Japanese characters on it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
It seemed like a lot of what you presented was around if someone was going to have a first-hand experience with Japan. So, for example, to go there or to have some kind of connection, a lot of that seemed to be taking into account what that individual's perspective or idea was. But in your research or maybe other things that you know about the market, especially for organizations like are represented here, are there certain areas where, especially having a group, so you heard like Heather or Ben talk about how they went as school children really to Japan, that was their first experience and it had a lifelong impact on them. Are there, is there some kind of sense of, what organizations should either focus on or what those entrees would be for people from the Midwest to go to Japan or be connected with Japan in some way?
I think that.
No.
The opportunities I think are huge. With kids especially, educational exchanges are really, really important because the number of students from Japan studying in the U.S. has dropped sharply in the past 20 years. They're trying to boost that up. So if you've got a group of musician kids or dancer kids or just kids who want to visit different school, huge opportunity. That's one of the things that hopefully the consulate can support a little bit. Any kind of trade organization, very happy to promote exchanges with the U.S. Lots and lots of opportunities. So many of the things that are available will never get taken advantage of. So the Central Partnership, the Japan Foundation, one of a number of, the U.S.-Japan Council, which I'm a member of, we have exchanges all during the year. And one in particular, we're trying to expand with the U.S.-Japan Council anyway. There's a program called the Japanese American Leadership Delegation and also an Asian American Leadership Delegation, which are really just exchanges. There's a lot of handshaking, picture taking, but who knows how much follow-up there is. But we scramble every year to say, who are we going to get? We got to find some people to go on this trip. So there's lots of opportunities, but as Caroline and I were talking earlier, and as I showed you, these things are just not really well communicated.
I have another question, maybe related, maybe not. There's a huge challenge around Japanese demographics today. There's just such an older population, and how do you connect our country with such, with people that, they're older, they're not as involved in that economic engine, they're not as involved in trade, they're not involved in education. How are we going to connect these populations that really have some demographic differences?
I think, again, part of it's who you're talking to. Certainly the respect for older people is well deserved when you rebuild the country and such, but I think that there's a huge opportunity for young people to not only be a part of that workforce that Japan so desperately needs, but also to really drive that next generation. Because in Japan, they're going through the same kinds of issues that baby boomers here are going through, with healthcare and with retirements and savings and that sort of thing. The aging workforce. So I think what's really going to drive that, quite frankly, is young people. There's an organization in Japan. Are you familiar with the Keidan Ren? It's like the chairman of Sony and the chairman of Toyota and all the chairmen who control the country. Anyway, they developed an organization called Forum 21. And Forum 21 is all up-and-coming young people from all the major corporations in Japan. Their sole project every year is to figure out what the heck are we going to do with all this. And the contact I've had with them saying, desperately want to meet with Americans to help us figure this out. So huge youth opportunity from little kids all the way on up.
From your research or maybe opinion, does the non-Japanese, Japanese food culture Does that have a positive or negative effect on Japanese?
Depends who you talk to. Generally, it's all positive. That's why sushi has exploded in this country. That's why you can find it in grocery stores now. That's why ramen has exploded in this country, which is why you're finding like bad ramen now. These non-Japanese people go, oh, I'm going to make some money off ramen, and I don't know anything about it. They've exploded. Other stuff has been slower, but it's all acceptable. Tempura, acceptable. Sushi, acceptable. Tonkatsu, acceptable. So, I mean, tonkatsu is like, your Iowa, pork fritter thing. Yeah, it's the same thing. What happens are two things. Particularly with food, you have a lot of people coming in who are trying to make money off the trend. And so they're pushing out bad product. So people are trying to go, oh, this is not so good. Why do I spend money on this? Without realizing you shouldn't have been eating it in the first place. And I don't know how it is here, but for example, in Chicago, in the city proper, of all the Japanese restaurants, very few of them are owned by Japanese people. They're either owned by Americans or Chinese or Korean. And having grown up with, real Nihon, I eat the sushi and go, what's wrong with this? It tastes funny. But people don't necessarily know that. These people aren't interested in culture. So that's one thing. The other thing that happens is that there are still a portion of the country, and thankfully it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I showed you that 6% of negatives. There are still people in this country who go, oh, sushi, that's what we call bait. Making jokes like that, and they say, no, I'm not going to eat that no matter what. Thankfully, that population is shrinking. Hopefully it will just shrink later. But I'll tell you that the most aggressive food marketers in this country are Koreans. They are growing faster than any other food culture in this country because they're making food that's accessible, it's street food, and they're making it accessible to groups. We did a project for, everyone's familiar with JETRO, the External Trade Relations Organization. We did a project with JETRO on food and beverage consumption. And one of the things we told them is your problem is that Japanese food has been positioned just like French food in this country. It's high-end, it is super exclusive, it's very expensive, and all the stories you've been telling for all these years about sushi chef, oh, they wouldn't even let me touch the fish for 10 years, or I had to do 2 years, is just sweep the floors. Nobody wants to hear that. It's a good story, but when you go to the grocery store, people look at a piece of tuna and go, I can't do that. It took that guy 10 years to learn how to cut fish. So we are hurting ourselves doing it. So not being able to tell people or not telling people, you can do this at home, you got a knife, it has really hurt the growth.
Did you have a question?
Well, no, just a comment.
Okay.
Actually, mine is just a comment too. I'm sorry, did I?
No.
Okay. I just did a quick look, and I saw that Governor Reynolds' statement is that the trade agreement was a victory for Iowa farmers, which I think is just kind of important information to file away and think about in terms of what the work that people in this group are doing.
Yeah.
I have a comment and then I have a question. My comment about is your comment about Ichiki sushi, and as a local person, I do my duty every year. I write a letter to the health department complaining about not investigating fake sushi, and I say this is just matter when somebody's going to get really sick. And I encourage you to do the same. Because until we just keep writing to them, they don't understand the difference between eating sushi and eating red beef. So my question for you is there such program for tourist promotional program where we can do it in Iowa and invite people to come just learn about Japan? And our company has very lucky to host a Japanese class for the last, I don't know, how many years? 5 or 6 years. And maybe we can expand it to like a Saturday or Sunday afternoon tours, promotional program. That would be fantastic because, what we think Midwesterner wants and what they may like are different because my younger son surprised me. My kids travel with me to all the tourist area, and for many, many years, every time when people talk to me about Kamakura, But then after we went to Kamakura one time, that was their favorite spot. Not because of the Buddha, because of the ocean, because of the sport they can do in Kamakura. And that's completely different from all the promotional programs you hear about Kamakura.
Is there an opportunity? Absolutely. I mean, JNTO, the Japan National Tourism Organization, that's their job. Unfortunately, they tend to focus on LA and New York and things like that. But I'm not going to volunteer the consulate, but I can because we're in between council and general right now. But this is the kind of program that the IACE, the Japanese Travel Agency in Chicago, and the consulate and local organizations could all team up together as a project and doing it together.
And the rail pass.
But just explain, rail travel and staying in
rail
ryokan and places like that. Absolutely, that's certainly possible.
That would be wonderful.
I have a kind of common question. I noticed in the Yamanashi brochures, and this is my 76-year-old white man prejudice coming through, I think. Here's this happy-go-lucky little gaijin talking about how wonderful thing is. That's an absolute turnoff to me. I want somebody who promotes the product in a reasonable, authentic way. I'm not looking at somebody who might be 18 years old. I mean, 18 years probably not. And everything is happy smiles. And I'm also what's called a grammar Nazi. Some of the grammar in that brochure is really, really.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, well, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, that's just mine. And I love Japanese food. I mean, I know the difference between sushi and sashimi. I mentioned to a couple of ladies, I was told we would have taco today, and I didn't mean taco, hamburger, I meant taco. But yeah, so that to me is a turn off, and I wonder if that's a turn off for maybe the 6%, if it was more of a measured response and more of a even promotion, it might not be so that's bait, I don't want to touch it.
One of the things that we've seen, and I mean, part of this is purely selfish because this is what my company and I do but for years we've said that if Japan is going to communicate with the United States, they have to understand American culture. Yes. And it really is just getting to the point now where, okay, we kind of get it. We have to have people on the ground and tell us what the positioning like this needs to be, as opposed to, here's what we're going to promote, oh yeah, we'll just snag somebody in there and make them talk, and that'll work. So it's really just fairly recently that the entire country has adopted a professional attitude towards it, if you will, as opposed to, yeah, that's a good idea. But I would agree, absolutely.
A little anecdote you might want to use in future speeches. I've worked with a lot of college kids and high school kids that come here for homestay and so on. And the dreaded moment is when they say, I want to take souvenirs home. No, there are no souvenirs made in the United States.
They made in Japan.
Yeah, they want it made in
They're either made in China, essentially, or Taiwan. There are no, and so what do they take? Candy, cookies, Hershey's, American candy. It's Americans.
I always tell people food products anyway. I mean, whenever I go back, when I would go to Japan and have to bring back gifts, I always bring food products.
The other thing I'd add is that my respect for Japan deepens as I become even more aware of the internal problems that they're facing. I mean, they've got a steamy side, boy, we have a steamy side. and you compare the two and wonder which one's got the worst problems, we both have difficult problems we're facing. It's tightly enmeshed in culture. And I would flip what you say around. If you want to contact or contribute, if you want to be in communications with Japan, you better know their culture too.
Well, that's a mistake that so many companies...
We expect them to understand us.
That's a mistake so many companies made in the 1980s when they started international business. That's the mistake, quite frankly, that the Japan-American Society in Chicago made in the 1980s. People said, okay, we're in the bubble. I'm going to join this group and I'm going to get business and become rich. And I said, no, you're not, because you don't understand the culture. You've never taken this guy out for a game of golf. You've never had lunch with them together. They don't know you. They don't trust you. Why should they do business with you? And it took many, many years for people to figure out that, oh yeah, maybe we better understand each other's culture. One of the things I did when I was on the Japan-American Society board in Chicago was I rewrote the mission statement. Because there are all these things about, we're going to build bridges and establish cultural exchange. I said, no, the first thing you want to do is become friends. And after that, everything's going to happen afterwards. But it took, again, 20 years for people to figure that out.
Cindy led tours to Japan in 88, 89, where we talked about care of aging issues.
Yeah.
We saw things there that should have been installed or applied or could have been picked up immediately in our nursing homes. I can tell you the only one thing that we saw that actually transported back was the positioning of sanitizing things outside every elevator, outside every door. That idea actually came back from Japan and was installed in a nursing home here in Des Moines. But we saw bathing systems. Remember that ultrasonic bathing? That was 1980. I'll bet there's not one of those installed in the entire United States.
Oh, never. But we did get walkers with seats.
Walkers with seats was another idea.
Yeah, finally.
And again, this is all what I tell people is you must understand the culture and how it relates to business. In aging care in Japan, they have robots that pick up people. Do you know what Paro is? Paro is a robotic seal. It looks and acts and sounds like a real seal. And it's been used as an aid to help comfort, people with dementia or little kids or things like that.
I guess like a seal that lives in
It
the water?
looks like a seal, yeah.
Like an actual
a gray
seal,
seal,
yeah.
But it kind of purrs and does this and crazy stuff. But anyway, that ties to the culture because in Japan, robots are your friend. Technology is your technology makes your life better. Versus the United States, robots are evil. Robots are determining. Robots are going to take over. Yeah. So it's a different kind of understanding, and it's all culturally based on what technology we can use to help society as a whole. At least how we position it.
But at least the younger kids are free. I have a 10-year-old grandson. If I don't have it, oh, Grandpa, you just touch this button. You just, he's 10 years old. But it's coming from the bottom, so it is happening. It's taking a long time, but yeah.
That's the nativization of culture. When kids play video games, I've been playing video games all my life. This isn't Japanese, this is me.
Mr. Konaki, I'm glad you brought up the cultural aspect, the communications aspect. I felt that that's what I wanted from the presentation, beyond the product and the positioning and the attitudes. So, 500-page report. How did some of the, as we go about our discussion in the next hour, what, other than the things we can do and the products that we can work with, how do we bring in more understanding of communication styles and conflict resolution and those sorts of things, the cognitive mindset?
What I tell people is get out there and do it. And partly, it's difficult because very few Americans are brought up this way. But I tell people you must be bicultural. What does that mean? It's like you need to understand when you're handing somebody a business card, you need to do it a certain way. You're not just playing Texas Hold'em, flinging them out. And that's just practice and learning and picking up on stuff. I tell people all the time, Nihongo wa karamasen, because my Japanese skills, speaking skills are so poor. But they said, well, how can you do business in Japan so easy? I said, because I took the time to learn about culture. And did I make mistakes along the way? Absolutely. Did I present things that I thought were Japanese because I learned them from my Meiji era grandparents. You know, absolutely. So we don't do that in modern day Tokyo anymore. That's from the 1800s. Does that go on? Yeah, but I think in almost any country we've done business in, if you try, people are really receptive to making it work. I think the only time I've ever seen people just shut down are when Americans mostly just say, we're not going to do that. You're going to do business our way, and that's it. And so whether it's a cultural exchange or business, academia, I think it all comes forward.
All right, great discussion, conversation, questions, and we're not done. But we are going to stick to the agenda, which says that we're going to take a little break right now. Just a reminder that the refreshments remain here, giving directions to the restrooms. You hopefully noted some other attendees that you might want to speak to in the next, we'll keep it on schedule. We'll go 10-minute break until 2:15, and then we'll come back. While you're gone, be thinking of your reaction to what you saw. And there's no such thing as a wrong answer. What did you think of? Let's talk about that cloud slide with all those words, and the larger ones and the darker colored ones were more often mentioned. Just think about what your reactions were. And that'll be our question when we resume at 2:15. Thank you. Okay, as I mentioned before you were dismissed for the break, I'm interested in hearing what your reactions are to the findings. That's exciting. What surprised you? What was most pertinent to you? Any reaction at all? But I know I certainly had reactions to everything I heard, so I'm trusting that you did as well. Who would like to start? Maybe.
I just want to give a different opinion on the negative reaction, mostly tied to World War II veterans. And I have a good example from Iowa. That's Mr. Belknap, who was in Japan after World War II to part of the rebuild with U.S. Navy. And
but after the war?
After the war, okay. After the war, yeah. And he has a completely different view of Japan because he just absolutely loved the work ethic of Japanese people and how resourceful, how helpful they are. And he's always trying to find a way to reconnect with Japan at his 80s.
Yeah.
And that's, compared to people just see Japan from far away.
Right.
They only see what they hear from media instead of people actually live there.
Right. Thank you. Okay, other reactions? Anyone else want to offer it up? I know this is the mid-afternoon, kind of sleepy time, but wake up. I'm going to send some of my co-facilitators around to be poking people to make sure. You had to have a reaction when you saw that. Good, bad, or otherwise.
Well, I think this is an important piece of information, but in some respects, I'm telling myself, let's not forget the purpose. This is the kind of information you need to know to establish the communications.
Exactly.
But if you interview 600 ignorant people, you're going to get ignorant responses. So, to the extent, this is what you want to define, what the average person thought about Japan. Whether it's true, false, whatever. I mean, if sushi is the first thing on there,
that's what they thought.
I mean, it's a whole society that is thousands of years old, and here we are in our 180th year or something. It's hard to try and understand that. So I just, in my own mind, I'm saying, yes, I understand this, and this is good information for people who want to connect, market, if you will, and communicate, if you will. But I don't know how far it's going to get you if you went to Japan with this information.
The most interesting thing we saw from the research, and I've never seen it come up in any other piece of research we've done. Sushi, yeah, we get that. Technology, we get that, yeah. Honor, it's like, huh? In this kind of exercise, we almost never see a value-related system or an ethical kind of word come up. Usually they're mostly hard product-related or hard things. I have never seen this come up.
It's because they've all seen The Last Samurai and the 47 Ronin.
Unfortunately.
And that's what they've seen, and that's what they know. And that's all honor. It's a cuckoo. I'm cured myself. So I'm a little suspicious. I notice, however, politeness. You can barely see it up there, but when I talk to people about Japan, to me they say, oh, they're so polite. Would be the first response I would give.
So to your point, Chuck, as we discussed the program for this auspicious fruit and what we knew Bob had to offer, everyone in here has a connection to Japan of some sort. It might be business, it might be you're involved with a cultural organization, it might be you're involved with a university that has a Japanese program, but I would say every one of us in here wants to improve our relationship, our access to talk. We want to spread, we want to talk more to other people about Japan. We want them to engage with our business, our cultural activity, or take our classes. I mean, we all have something that we want to accomplish that probably may require more marketing than what we've been doing. And so what is it that we can learn from this snapshot of the Midwest, and what can we take away, and how can we make that our own? Now, making it our own is later in this hour. So, because I'm going to ask you to do that. Right now, just looking, what strikes you from this?
One of the things that struck me was the technology was an obvious one for me, but the fact that robotics was a small part of that overall technology, and to me, it's just the way I view it.
I should have mentioned a little bit earlier that this is pure raw data, right? That's sorted based on weighting.
Yeah.
So some of the stuff here is absolute nonsense, like Mandarin, like that didn't fit. But that was response that came up enough that it caught on here. But remember, we're only asking first 3 words.
Okay.
So when we do that, a lot of these things fall out. When we ask for longer descriptions, it gets much richer. That's why we do the 3 stages.
Yeah.
And if they've been given 10 minutes to think about it, their answers might be different as well, because this would be, what's the first things you think of off the top of your head, which may not be the greatest depth of your memory.
And the only other word that popped up that I was confused by is weird. How did weird come out?
I don't know. I'll try to I'll try to be as appropriate as I can be, but do you know the term hentai? Hentai. It's a...
Just how he said it, we got it.
It's a specific kind of Japanese adult entertainment, which is a little bit freaky.
But that word weird, I actually heard my kids say that about different cultures.
About not necessarily Japan, but a different culture.
Right. One summer, I was born in Taiwan, and my father grew up in Japan. But one summer they spend 6 weeks in Taiwan, and as soon as they get to the airport in Taipei, they rush to Burger King, and then they sit down and start eating their burgers, and they say, "Oh, those Chinese are so weird, and then they burp. That's a typical Taiwanese habit of burping after a good meal. And so, kids would say words like that. I can see that, yeah.
And weird, I would allocate weird with different.
Yeah.
Okay, good,
Just
thank you.
yes. one comment.
Yes, please.
One Japanese talking about hentai. Hentai has a various meaning. Very genius is the same thing. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So, just
Good. Thank you.
I just want to say about the sushi a little more, I think addition to everybody else. I wonder that what percentage of the sushi is California roll in that thing?
Actually, a lot of it.
Yeah, so that's the whole the point of it. So it's a perception, but category of sushi and representing Japanese culture, but California roll invented by the I think that the Seattle sushi chef, wasn't it, originally? And yeah, that is to fit, it's a really pure marketing genius, how to sell sushi more to American customers. So that's that sushi all about, not really the big fat the total and or those the traditional ones. And also I always screaming to the customers, American customers, that the dipping too much of the soy sauce in the soy, the sushi. Oh yes. And even the scooping the rice in the soy sauce and eating that with the spoons. That is American.
This is why I'm going deeper discussion, because there are people say, I love sushi. And then you go further, go like, what? Oh, California roll or dragon roll, whatever the heck that is. And I say, oh, what about, uni, ikura? Like, what? Well, sea urchin. No, never. So,
you have to see that taste when they see that. For us, uni is, wow, it's uni, delicious. But when they saw it first time, oh, that's the weird.
See, if you understand the fact that most sushi in the Midwest is sold at supermarkets, you will understand why that's the reaction. Because they're not going to sell uni in a supermarket.
Right. It's all made by Chinese. All Chinese Japanese food is made by Chinese people.
In Chicago, it's the Koreans.
I think we have a challenge when we get to like the purity of the Japanese food or purity of Japanese music or anything else related to Japan, and then how other people in other countries who are never going to go to Japan are going to react to that. And there's a certain synthesis that has to take place, and it's taken place whether it is German beer or Swedish cookies or ginger snaps or things like that. And there has to be some ability of that, the culture where that's emanating from, to accept that there's a synthesis. When it gets, when Mexican food comes back to the U.S., Mexican food is not Mexican food in the U.S. And neither is Chinese, and neither is Vietnamese or anything else, really. So, and yet it gets that initial connection made. So I think that's where we are kind of figuring out how we're going to both represent and synthesize and make it still work.
One of the things we found from our food research is that a certain amount of appropriation is good. It helps everybody. Just don't let it go too far. Just don't let people take over the culture.
Cindy?
What these words brought to my mind is, and maybe I missed it in the beginning, but in terms of your sampling, since I've done research for a lot of years, what was the age range of your people that were sampled?
And
what was
1854.
1854? So that's why your 6% is lower.
We match it demographically by state.
Yeah, so that's why your 6% is lower in that group. And probably why your sushi is higher, and so that because you're looking at a younger population.
Well, back to the Midwest, you're 6%. So you did the same thing in Clark County, Mississippi, or Hunt County, Alabama, your 6% would be 80%.
I told the Consul General this should be a national study, but he said, no, I just look at 10 states.
Yeah, the 10 states in the Midwest. And for our purposes, this is perfect, because everyone in here represents some entity within the Midwest, and this is something the information we have now that we did not have before. So other reactions to this information?
What year did you do this?
This year.
Yeah, I want to make sure people, anyone who hasn't had a chance to, any reactions to this? Any other people that haven't had a chance to talk and want to give me their reactions? Okay, Cindy, a second one?
I just wanted to make a comment in relationship to the people who had really positive reactions to Japan after the war. I've had incidences where I've had Japanese adults here, and I have had doors slammed in their face by older Americans in the Midwest. And it's very insulting to them, of course, and it's very embarrassing for me. And so there still is a real negative component that sits. And I had a friend of mine who was hosting a guest. Her father, who happened to be very prominent, was a judge, had fought in the Marines in World War II in Japan, in the Eastern Theater, and he said, "What do you have in a gute at your house for?" And this is a man who is well-educated, an attorney and a judge, but still harbors that anger because of being in the theater.
Sometimes that becomes multi-generational in a family.
And it goes down,
feelings.
yeah.
However, I definitely think that is dissipating as time goes on, and information and products and all of that increases. Yes, Ben?
Well, Carol, that's just one of the things I was kind of interested in, this convergence of the past and the present, and to speak more directly to that. But I'm retired Air Force, and so I worked in headquarters in Hawaii, and we still to this day maintain the bullet holes that are there from Pearl Harbor as kind of a remembrance. But at the same time that we're maintaining those bullet holes to remember the history, and we're well aware of it, at the same time we're working with the Japan Self-Defense Force every day. And they are, no kidding, like our biggest ally, or I should say one of our biggest allies. And so I can't imagine getting anything done without them. So there is this constant convergence between the two, and so it's just interesting to see with the 6% negative, why, and the fact that it's at that number, and trying to understand why, and to what extent. It's interesting because I wasn't sure if people understand, for example, the current history. That things have kind of flipped. I mean, we are really working together, and that's beyond the military. You touch on economic aspects and political aspects as well.
Thank you for that. That's a very good balance there. And I have to tell you, my reaction, I thought the 6% was awesome. Yeah. I thought that is really low in the Midwest for something as what I would consider unknown. Japanese, and as those questions drilled down in further slides, I just thought that was a wonderful result. It'll never be zero. Nothing is ever, you will never take a poll on anything unless you handpick your respondents, where everyone is in favor. So I thought my reaction, and not as much to this. This I thought was very curious and interesting, but to some of the other findings, it was like to me, the findings, there was no bad news here. It was good news and lots of opportunity is what I took away from, again, not this particular slide, but the other data. So other reactions, otherwise I'm going to, just reactions, and then we're going to go into some other questions.
I have one more. I think looking at this thing here, the biggest surprise and really exciting thing is animation is not there. That means, your age group, 18 to 54, a lot of them watch Japanese animation, but they don't think it's boring.
Yeah,
so, I
think it is here.
But it's not big.
It's smaller though, but again, anime is between Sushi and Tokyo. Again, because we dug deeper, we said, why is this the case? And they said, because we don't think anime is Japanese.
Exactly. Yeah.
They don't exactly mention. Okay, Peter.
Carol, just one thought. One of the questions was, what would this look like in other areas? We have Japan America societies all over the country, and one of the things that you would see, for example, if you did this in the Southeast, Tennessee and Kentucky, you probably wouldn't see 6%. You'd see a lot lower. because Japan has been such a heavy investor in those areas, particularly with the automobile industry and the automobile parts industry. Japan has gone from a situation where people didn't know anything about it to a situation where Japanese companies are major employers in those areas, a little bit different than here, and has changed the impression of Japanese in a very positive way.
I think in specific areas that's very true. Like if you go to Plano, Texas, they're loving Toyota. But remember, what we did here is a matched demographic sample for the 10-state region. So this is sort of defocusing from those major metropolitan areas where there's been direct investment. So I think if you go to Johnson County, Tennessee, it might be a little bit different than some other areas.
Eastern Tennessee has a ton of Japanese investment. I think you'd have the same reaction there.
But it does beg the question of not the 6%, but that middle category of where they don't know much about. Does that number go way up, or does it stay lack of understanding?
With most projects we've done like this, usually a good 50% is don't know, don't care.
Okay. All right, so that then I think feeds into the discussion that we're wanting to have of how do we get that number smaller?
Yes. Yes.
I'm struck by how much reference there is to history from the 40s versus recent history with the earthquake and the tsunami, and that was big news not that long ago. And certainly people in the demographic that you sampled should have been, I would have thought, been aware, and I see no reference.
Well, unless you keep up on the news, which most Americans don't. Yeah. Most of what they know is from history lessons, and that was history stopped in 1946. So
the evening news doesn't get past the golden circle of Des Moines, right? Here, so.
Right. And again, the top 3 things that they think of and quick response. Good. All right. What influence do you feel that the media had on people, had in this case, or has, on people's perceptions of Japan or Japanese culture? Where does the media play into these images?
I think certainly in World War II era, it certainly influenced them, but now you really don't see much in the news about Japan unless Trump goes over and plays golf with Abe.
Okay. So anybody seeing any connection? Media connection, good or bad?
Well, I think the threat from North Korea, into Japan, and the nuclear threat, certainly there's a lot of news, has been a lot of news until they stop doing that, but we don't know what's going to happen next. And so I think that I think it affects our own security very quickly.
Okay.
One of the things we do, or our company does for the consulate is track media. One of the things we do for the consulate is track media. And generally in the Midwest, only 3 subjects ever get covered. Agriculture, a little bit on security issues, and anything to do with the president. And by far, of all the states in the Midwestern region, the state with the most media coverage on Japan-related issues is Nebraska. And that's driven by Governor Ricketts. The rest, not so much. Because Governor Ricketts mentions Japan every single month.
Why? Give us, I don't know why.
He's a big Japan fan. He realizes how important Japan is to agriculture, because I think Japan is maybe number 2 trading partner with Nebraska, more than Mexico. I think Canada, Japan, Mexico. And he has just been working that relationship. QP Mayonnaise opened up a factory in Nebraska. I'm blanking on the company that's been there, a tech company. Anyway, he realizes, he recognizes direct investment, and he pushes it every single month.
I was just wondering that how many people usually, where you think that even at BBC at night. No, we do, a lot of people watch that, like a 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock news, pretty much local news. And what do you watch that 5:30 at the national news, or even at PBS news? What in the BBS, do you know about that? So then this is, to me, after living in 30 years in the United States, this is a big country. And it's been like really protected by this size of the massive size of the land. And no country, other countries, otherwise, unless few, can attack that. The Midwest, those missiles or anything. A lot less threat. What do you have to worry about the other country? That's the bottom line of how you grew up. And then more importantly, is it going to be rain tomorrow for the crop? That is more important for farmers. That I think I'm not sure if I'm talking about the stereotype of the Midwesterners, but that's how I see it sometimes. And when I watch that, the BBC and something, what's going on in Europe and so the Middle Eastern, when I talk to my colleagues, they don't know about it. And they're not concerned about it, about the oil price and those kind of stuff, and is that going to be terrible this weekend or the holiday seasons, just because probably could be a war happening that way. But I think that's something to do with the schooling. The school teaches their students about how to look at the world, other side of the world, or outside of U.S., even outside of Iowa. That's, I think, that when it comes to really the higher educations, they have to be more more interested. I hope we have the higher education, the staff member here, professors and those people. We have to make those students, at least that little by little, move their attention to outside world. At least that to realize that who you are, then while you are living, you have to know outside. That's what I think.
I think I just heard you say that we need more cultural programs.
Yes.
and you're right. The good news is Japan is not in the news often, because if it is, it's for bad things, right? Because that's what the news is going to be reporting. So again, I think for us to focus the conversation around what kinds of activities, what kinds of, what do we want to be, what do we want as our channel for communication? If not news, what?
Yes.
Iowa Public TV does run NHK, but it's at strange hours that you probably just don't watch it.
You can just go online and
But for the don't knows, the large segment of population
they're not going to go
currently don't. Yeah, what's going to prompt them to go online, or regardless of what time it's on public television, to actually take the time to watch it? So what is it that you, in your role, whatever that role might be, what is it that you think might be a strategy or something that you might try? What are your takeaways? Let's begin to move into that. What are your takeaways from this for your connection with Japan, your personal connection? Because everybody's different, everybody's coming from a different place and going back to a different place. So what can you...
I have friends in Japan. I sent 6 emails this morning concerning the typhoon. I've received answers back before. I have friends in Japan. I think that's a powerful message.
Yeah. That's our case too. I sent an email today too. Several of our homestay students who are now adults and starting to think of them as adults because they were kids when they were our friends on Facebook.
Right.
And we correspond with them.
Yeah, and I understand that the typhoon headed towards Yamanashi
Sort of split
sort
around.
of, yeah, so that Yamanashi is in the.
They're out
so
of
that's good to know.
evacuation order.
So, yes, definitely. But, so for an aspirer, that was 23% of the respondents kind of qualify as aspirers. They'd like to know more. We talked about it costs money to travel. You may or you may not have an opportunity to make a friend in Japan. So there's got, because the travel and the friends, for real friends, people that you know, are pretty high level relationships. So you got a big gap in the middle, which is probably where we're all dealing. So how do we move the needle within the, yeah, Toriana.
So my perspective is pretty narrow, but I kind of have a recommendation. I have taught many times at Simpson College a short-term course on Kurosawa's adaptations of Shakespeare. He did 3 films that are more or less adaptations of 3 of Shakespeare's tragedies. The students who enroll in the class, many of them are already interested in Japan and are probably in that aspiring category. Okay. And they, a lot of times they are interested because of anime, manga, and things that I don't really have a lot of access to or haven't grown up with. And so they have this sort of peripheral interest at least, and I introduce to them what I know and what I've studied for many years now. Again, it's really narrow, but who thinks, you know, oh yeah, I'm going to get to know Japan through Shakespeare, or through, God forbid, a black and white subtitled film. And seriously, that kind of stuff, a lot of the time students come in and they say, oh no, it's subtitled? Well yes, it's Japanese, what were you expecting? And yeah, and then we get to the I always teach The Bad Sleep Well as the last one, and that's in black and white. But it's also the most modern setting. It's post-war Japan. Most of the students come out of that class really charged about what they have seen. They just have a completely different point of view after they have engaged with those films. So, you know, it's not, I would say that class is not meeting them where they are exactly. But it's taking advantage of a little interest they have and giving them something deeper to connect with. And again, I am no expert by any means, but they are interested in learning more after that.
It's moving them on the continuum of, here's what I know, I want to know more.
Yeah.
Yeah, which if our respective populations, students or cultural groups of the general public, or if everyone could come up with strategies to get their own clientele, however that might be defined, moved along to, and then what is it that you provide as a professor, or help them find where they're headed, to help them find the next step for them, and where do organizations take where you are and advance that. Sherry?
I'm wondering if through the research you were able to determine if there are, you've identified certain, like cuisine, food, the arts, economy, are topics of interest. Have you uncovered really what are the channels that have been the most successful? So
only anecdotally, nothing is projected. But just looking outside, the taiko players, none of them are Japanese. The kendo group, I do kendo myself, so I was talking to them. None of them are Japanese. And I'll tell you, from kendo especially, one of the things I always ask people in the demonstration, I say, how many of you have seen Star Wars? Everybody says, well, of course I've seen Star Wars. I said, that's where George Lucas stole all of his ideas from kendo. Yeah. And every time there's a movie like that, or The Last Samurai, unfortunately, We get loads of people coming in and say, I want to learn more. So it's just figuring out, with what, even with what you've already got, you're probably not exploiting every single facet of what you do and who you can reach right now. So there's always a way.
I think one more thing about this type of group, we started it about 6 years ago, and I was one of the person that put together the program. And then eventually I left the program because I thought that this is not a Japanese program, this is an American program. What we are for is that not pushing not the Japanese culture in that framework of that this is Japanese, you have to be Japanese and to play Japanese. Doesn't have to be. This is the adaptation of Japanese culture, and if as long as you can enjoy and yet accept it, just like Japanese people in Japan, we do break dancing and some all other kind of stuff, and among all jazz and everything. Is there any American there? No, we adapt it. The same thing.
I've been trying to push people kicking and screaming to expand their definition of Japanese American, because in most of the 20th century, the definition was your parents came mostly from Western Japan, in Hiroshima, Wakayama, things like that. They went through the internment process during World War II. Their third generation kids were white-collar workers and everybody's doctor, lawyer, accountant. They said, no, you've got to get rid of that definition. You've got to understand that the community here is now that traditional definition, but also shinise. It's also people who are like my daughter, Hapa, half, not 100% Japanese American, plus anybody who is interested in the culture. I mean, we say we have got to take them into our community, because some of the people who have come most regularly and most involved are 0% Japanese. They just love the culture to the point where we will support whatever you do. So it's a different way of looking at it.
Yeah. In there somewhere, there's a lesson for Japan too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I will say though, if you're going to do anything ethnic, you've got to have some ethnic people in there, or else people start to question. But absolutely.
Okay. Good comments.
I always looked at our Japanese language programs in the high schools as being really important as well, because that starts at an early age, the interest both in language, but you can't study Japanese without being involved with the culture.
Right.
But there's been a cutback here, and I suppose that may be going on a lot.
The only expansion of foreign language in this country in the past probably 30 years has been the Confucius Institutes around the country, and they're all closing now.
Are they?
How many Japanese newspapers are still in the United States?
Japanese name? 4. Rafu Shimpo, Nichibei Weekly, one in Seattle and one in Chicago.
Does Dr. Hakeem have anything here today?
We can get them online.
Well, but I mean,
So
I'm talking about it.
on the Japanese language and foreign language in general in the United States is being downplayed significantly. With, I believe, the expectation that everybody else is learning English, we don't need to.
Yes.
So that presents unique challenges to universities, so, Shitsu, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, and also technology. We are competing with technology. Like I hear that a lot of students on Drake campus, not that. Number one, the interest in Japan is decreasing, at least at Drake. A lot of people who have interest in Asian countries go to K-pop. K-pop is really huge. So now my student, it was really interesting. It is really interesting because I've been teaching Japanese for almost 30 years. In the 90s, people and students are interested in business, right? They want to learn Japanese for the business sake. And then anime comes out. And now anime fans don't take Japanese anymore, like somebody said. They don't think anime is Japanese. And also, they can watch anime without knowing Japanese nowadays. They are all subtitles or they are dubbed, right? And then maybe some new fans show up, and then some horror movie fans show up. And now, at least 50% of students have interest in Korea, South Korea. But they can't take Korean at the Drake campus, so maybe take Japanese.
It's close to that.
So number one, yeah, number one is K-pop influence and also technology. They can learn Japanese online without spending a single penny. There are a lot of resources, right? And we teach better, you know. We teach better, love better. But younger generation don't really think about it. They don't really care about the quality. They don't need a PhDs teaching Japanese anymore.
Right. So, do you see positive information or something that you can take back in your role? Is there anything that you think, oh gosh, you know, I might be able to do this or that to move forward?
Well, maybe working with the anime club. I know there's an anime club.
Yeah, I'm an advisor.
Yeah. So, well, there you go.
They don't really, they show that interest. And nowadays the students are really busy, right? They have like a double major, triple majors.
Okay.
And then Drake doesn't require language skills. So the only students who take Japanese is the students who have strong interest.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take Japanese no matter what. So I think Drake is kind of moving to more like a direction in culture. So I'm teaching a Japanese culture course now. Then students don't really, you know, worry about studying 5 hours a day to memorize vocabulary and stuff. They can kind of learn the culture. So that's one way to kind of survive.
And to keep Japan and Japanese culture moving forward in the knowledge of your students could maybe is better done through culture instead of language, at this, all things considered.
Well, the Vietnamese student group does a big celebration on campus. So there is definitely an opportunity and I would think an interest in this.
So the one thing that we want to do Sakura Festival to cultivate more knowledge and interest in Japan. So hopefully those things will help us too.
So and everyone else in here needs to be watching on your on the Drake website. They're beginning a festival, Japanese festival.
You have the dates set?
Yes, I think
you actually have the dates.
April.
The real dates?
I don't remember the exact dates, but I remember it's in April.
April. Okay. Good. Yeah, Peter.
Now, you mentioned the question of how to interest the people, how to gather the people who are interested in Japan. And the festivals are one of the ways that other Japan-America societies in the Midwest area do that. Kansas City has a festival, St. Louis has a festival. The photograph that Bob showed of a Japanese garden, take advantage of a local resource, that's the famous Japanese garden at the St. Louis, Missouri Botanical Garden. And they have a big festival there that the Japan-America Society organizes. It's difficult to do. I mean, it's a big organizational effort. It's not easy to do. But the thing that it accomplishes is that it gets a lot of people who are interested in different aspects of Japan and not necessarily interested in the other aspects of Japan. It gets the anime crowd, but it also gets the kendo folks. And it gets a lot of people together who are interested in different aspects of Japan once a year and broadens the interest. So there are of the Japan-America societies that are similarly situated to Iowa. That's the most common method of trying to reach those who are interested in Japan but aren't devotees. But it is complicated. It does take a lot of organizational time and effort.
When you say similarly situated, as in?
All volunteer Japan-American societies that are in places that don't necessarily have big corporate sponsors nearby. So they have, it's the method that they undertake to try to get all the different sorts of interest in Japan to come together. The one in Washington, D.C. is the Cherry Blossom Festival. It has 40,000 people who attend, and they charge admission. So they have achieved an economic stability, economic sustainability. Others, like St. Louis, also charge admission.
30,000 people.
and they have a lot of people who go, and they don't join the Japan American Society necessarily, but they like to go to that event, and it becomes their event. So that's one
I'm
thing.
going to have New, if you would, please, I'm going to call on her.
Go ahead.
Correct me, Chia or Kyo or anyone associated with Jazzy. The Jazzy events here in Iowa they happen, but they're more low-keyed, this similar in size and nature to this. And correct me if I'm wrong. Has Jazzy ever pulled off a very large celebration in this community?
You mean that level, like a celebration?
Well, or
well, we don't necessarily
several
have
thousand people, let's say.
Well, no, not that many.
Yeah.
Well, we did have, a couple of years ago, we had to kind of stop that, but we 6 years in a row, we had an anime convention, Anime de Moi. Other than that, the biggest celebration that we join is of course IA's celebration over the Memorial Day weekend. 13 different the Asian countries get together and celebrate. Definitely takes a lot of resources from our organization to consider our organization as well.
I forgot about the anime. What kind of, you got real good attendance at, that was at Drake, right, the anime?
Yes, that was about 1,000 people attended.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was single focus, but it was very successful.
Yes.
Well, and it was also a great way to introduce them to other aspects of Japanese culture.
Yes, yes. New, many people in this room know you and the wonderful track record of Celebration and how it is the same, but it's different than what we're talking about, which Peter's idea is a uniquely Japan celebration. So, but for the benefit of those who may not be aware of that and how it is structured, would you kind of give up, I think I'll just stand up, make sure everybody on this end can hear you. Just give a kind of a summary of how it operates and what you think about the good things and the challenging things.
Absolutely. So I've been in the executive director role for Iowa Asian Alliance. Oh my gosh, 5 years, going on 5 years already. And I mentioned earlier when I introduced myself, we're 18 years old. And so that's why Jazzy is one of the great organizations leading the way for all these other smaller Asian American and Pacific Islander organizations. But absolutely, Celebration, the Asian Heritage Festival, how many of you have attended? So majority, excellent. What I love about this organization, that event, is it really unifies all the different communities. And as we know, all these, it's challenging, because here, especially in the Midwest and we're small, right? But we know when we come together, there's a greater impact and a greater opportunity to pull off something, an event of this scale. There's no way, when you ask TA, have you done an event that's thousands? I mean, when they're volunteering on top of full-time, it's just almost impossible to do. And even with Celebration, where we work at least 4 to 6 months out of the year. And again, I'm the only paid staff. The rest are all about probably 500 volunteers after it's all said and done. Many of them are sitting in this room. And the last 5 years that I've been involved, they started back in 2002, maybe 5,000 for the first event, not knowing how successful it'll be. We are now well anywhere. If perfect weather can get up to 50, 60,000 people that come through the 2-day festival. When we first started, it was actually just 1 day. And then prior to the last 5 years, it remained a 1-day festival, and it was cut short. It started maybe 10 a.m. and wrapped up about, 6 or 7. That hardly gives you the time to even, by the time someone get off work or you work, you really had to plan for it. You already had to be invested in it or like a part of it, or you really had to already seek out the event to go. Like I think someone was talking earlier with the students. I really had to already want to learn and be a part of Japanese. I'm not just happen to be walking by, oh, what is that restaurant? Or what is that? Or, oh, there's a nail salon in my neighborhood? Or, whatever the case, right? The opportunity is not because you happen to walk by it. So I think one of the things we talked about that has to change. We have to bring it to very more prominent neighborhood and area. We have to expand it to allow people even the opportunity to attend. So that was one of the biggest changes we made in the last 5 years. We moved it to a 2-day event. That was huge for the vendors. If they're taking that much time and energy, they're small mom and pop shops, some are established, well, successful business owners, but it wasn't worth their time to invest all that time and energy to have a food stall there if they're only having like a 10-hour window. But 2 days, sure. So that was a very positive change for us. And then we had to move location. We were more towards the east side of town, towards the Capitol. Again, you had to really seek out or know of someone that's connected to the event. We moved to downtown Central, Western Gateway Park, a premier area. All of a sudden now you got thousands of people surrounded, seeing these signs popping up, what is going on, where are they setting up? So whether they wanted to learn or know or have any connection to IAA or this festival, they were forced to say, what is going on out there? To look out the window and say, oh, they're setting up for a festival? Oh, okay, well, I might as well pop out for lunch and check it out. So then you're creating a greater window and opportunity for people, not by choice, but I just happen to be passing by, let me pop in and learn more about it. And that's definitely expanded our audience, double, triple, in terms of sales and revenue. We're nonprofit, but again, it's the vendors and the organizations like them that are involved. That's really, you know, makes this greater Iowa Asian Alliance organization successful. But I think that's one of the things we talked about, and Sherry, you mentioned a couple times, it's the percentage that are passive, just like when you talk about political parties. Who are we all trying to target? The ones that don't care or are not on extreme one or the others, right? We're trying to target that middle, say, okay, what is it that so it's more about how do we get in front of you versus.
And that should be a strategy built in. I mean,
right.
The shift, you saw up there, the shift from a neighborhood event to a city event is a significant thing. And if I can offer any encouragement for you, the Fort Wayne, Indiana Cherry Blossom Festival. Fort Wayne, Indiana has less of everything than you do here. Fewer Japanese people, fewer Japanese companies, fewer people, period. And they get 10,000 people to their Cherry Blossom Festival. It can be
solely
done.
Japanese.
Yeah, it can be done,
Yes.
absolutely.
You know, and we were talking earlier, you had mentioned here a ramen festival would be very difficult, but we held a pho king cook-off for the love of food, and and we've done it now for 4 years. I paused, and it's wonderful. But you're right, the audience when you look at that is not predominantly Asian. Or they're the ones interested or curious, or their friend is pulling them to say, okay, you got to check out this pho cook-off, you have to try it. And we've had people that's never tasted and tried pho before, but it sounds like a fun event. Okay, let's go check it out. It has drinking. Okay, I'm in. Something's pulling me in there. But then they're exploring then a whole other culture where they're at.
That's the historical success of Chinese restaurants. The most successful Chinese restaurants will have 90% non-Chinese people eating them.
Any questions? I can help you answer.
Thank you. Well, I knew obviously of the success of that event and the fact that, is it 13 Asian countries that are represented?
Yes. Yes.
And do they all consider to have a village, and that's
13 Asian villages today, yes. And we're always trying to grow because, as you know, a lot of incoming immigrants, refugees, and yeah.
And being the highlighted village for the year, which Japan was the highlighted village for 2019, and then they get extra stage time and prominence, but then presumably then only happens once every 15 years. So, yeah, it's a very successful event. So I don't know whether a Japan only event in that kind of scale, but there's, you know, let's see what Drake puts together here. Okay, any other take-home? We're winding down here. Any other take-home ideas? Something that you thought of while Bob presented, was stimulated by something someone else said? Yes, Dale.
I've often thought of experiential opportunities for learning about new cultures as kind of like a community swimming pool. So you've got your wide, shallow end where people just want to dip their toes into it and see if it's something they're going to be interested in. But you have to also, and that's usually a very large area, and there's a lot of different experience opportunities there, whether it's food, music, dance, clothing, any number of things there. And then, but also along with that, constantly be thinking about how to get people further into the deeper end. Maybe not full immersion right off the bat. Nobody jumps in the deep end right away, at least not very many. But to give them that opportunity for multiple experiential opportunities to get them towards that immersion.
Yes.
I just want to throw in a little bit of the question to everyone. I teach the Japanese culture at the Simpson College, and I also be part of the state government too. So then I'm sometimes having two different questions. One is that, why am I teaching Japanese culture here? So what is it important to know to let people know about Japanese culture, and also why you have to, what is the benefit of knowing different countries, different cultures? It doesn't have to be Japan, maybe China and Europe, anything outside of Iowa. What if the kid doesn't, does grow up without knowing outside of the community? So if you think about those risks, what is the risk, and also what would be missing point? What benefit are they missing? If they don't know how to eat sushi. And also the other thing is that knowing that they grew up this much and they're 55 years old, and then I know more about how Japanese politics works and American government works, and between those the policy making, those kind of stuff. Why they are doing that? Despite the fact sometimes I talk to the bad thing about why the Japanese government are doing that to the consulates, the staff members, and making them bad time, but those things that about relationship with Japan and South Korea and China, and we're trying to get along here. Why Japan and other countries in the political level are doing that opposite way and not helping us? So then I think that the part of the important thing that what if we don't know about the other countries for the Midwesterners, and also what if we don't do the due diligence? Making friends here locally. So that's things that we have to, it's always that balance. We said, he mentioned about it's expensive to travel to Japan. Well, that's a value proposition. How much is it expensive to go to Japan? Some the anime enthusiasts, they spend thousands of dollars there. Is that, for them, that's the I wouldn't say nothing, but that's the valuable thing to get. So then it's really we have to gain the value of knowing friends, having friends, and over time.
I think the value of cultural education is that eventually you discover that all of the problems are the same. The way they're handled is what's different. I will say another way. I'll say it again, you'll hear it. All of our problems are the same. We have different ways. How many ways are there to go to Minneapolis? You can go to Omaha first if you want. And some cultures say, yeah, we'll solve that problem first. We're going to go to Omaha and then Minneapolis. Another culture might say, no, we'll just take 35 straight north. It's the same problem, different solutions. And I think the idea, the understanding that we have the same life problems is really important.
Sherry, can you let us know what your takeaways from today are? Sorry to put you on the spot.
You know how my mind works. It seems to me that we have a lot of, I'm going to call them assets. And if we could take inventory of all of the assets that we have here with regard to Japanese culture, Some of it's through the music and the dance and the cuisine, and we know that through K-pop and Bollywood and all those forms of culture is what heightens awareness and popularity about a society. So through taking inventory of all of the things that we have, let's figure out what are the channels of communication or the channels of delivery that we can provide that's going to have the greatest impact. And I think it's a brainstorming exercise where we can pull all of that together, harness it, and come out of it with a couple of to-do lists that are really fairly simple. That's my takeaway.
Well, what reminds me about the conversation that I had about identifying and capturing information of all of the assets that exist within the greater community, the state, whatever, the Midwest, and sharing that information, finding an effective way to communicate.
Thanks for asking.
Thanks for not getting either that I pointed you out. Other thoughts? Takeaways?
I went to a conference last year where one of the speakers, who actually he's from Southeast Asia, but he spoke on this nonprofit conference. He said, really all nonprofits are about building community. And especially those where what we're doing either in this specific Japanese culture and connection, or whether it's the larger Asian connection, it is building a community here in Iowa for people who have a connection to Japan or want to have a connection with Japan, is building that community. So I think there's whatever we can do to do that. I think there are small things. Sort of, I like your analogy of this pool where some of it's a shallow end and some of it's a deep end, and we have to have something that meets the needs of everyone.
Thank you very much for all these thoughts and then discussion items. And I always learn, and every year when I go to Chicago to attend, and that's why you're sitting here, right? Like here today. When I went there, and then I saw this presentation, Mr. Kumaki was presenting. I was impressed. Oh my gosh, I have to bring this home. I have. So, and of course, not just meeting I go to, and all the 37 other JAS get together. And I learned something from there too, of course, helping each other networking, not just that, how you can make it, maintain and grow your organization and so on and so forth. Well, in Des Moines, Iowa, this JAS Iowa is very, very small organization. Only volunteers, including myself. I have a full-time job, and I also have this job that I enjoy so much, and all these people that are helping me out in putting these type of events together. It's such a learning opportunity, great opportunity for me. And your thoughts and the feedback, and then things that you have provided from here. I hope you have some takeaway as well, because just like I saw this diagram the very first day, and oh wow, this is something that I can take it, to make something happen. So that's my takeaway. I will take this to my group, and I'm going to discuss with my board members and then other interested members that what can we do about this? What can we do? We're small, doesn't mean that we don't have to get big, but what can we do to keep introducing our precious culture, language? And we are a very great organization. The reason why is we have 5 different communities. Such a small organization, but yet we have 5 great communities. Language, Japanese language, we're teaching children every Saturday. And we have the Taiko group. They're growing as ever, and you gotta hear their music. Their performance is wonderful. And we have anime group. They're taking a little break, but they successfully run the event every single year for 6 years. They're very passionate about that, and cosplay and things like that. The younger generation loves it. And we have the tea restoration group, and tea house being restored. Now we have to find a home. So, okay, we still have work to do here, right? And we have the kimono club that we're wearing kimono, some of us do, and so was Akio-san, and we try to cherish that, we try to preserve this traditional style, but yet welcoming the new style, right? So we're kind of looking into the fashion and category as well. Such a small organization, but a lot of activities going on, a lot of thinking going on. That's wonderful things. And now my job, my responsibility and mine to do is to bring this diagram to my group and then, hey, what can we do to make it sustain this organization 30 years and 30 years more and more? What can we do about that? So that's my takeaway. We're gonna have a quick break here, and they should have a cash bar set up around 3:30, which is only 10 more minutes. Those of you who would like to just have soft drinks or anything like that, you can get it. Or then, of course, somewhere 5 o'clock around the world. So please don't hesitate to start to get going after some good stuff. I'm definitely one of them. So, and 4 o'clock, all VIP, all of you are free of charge. Reserved seating is when you go into the Steve Elysium auditorium, and you're going to see the front part of the rows. It's the paper that says reserved. Those seats, any seats can be taken. So that will be 4 to 5. The theater in Nogaku. If you have never seen a No before, you'll be very, very surprised to see that beautiful. No is one of the oldest theater performance in Japan. So, and we're going to have a half-hour break. And during the break, Soten Taiko also, they're going to talk about their history. So you are certainly free to roam around, look around the things, and then whatnot. But Soten Taiko, our greatest type group, and they're performing 5:30 to 6:30. Then 6:45, we're gonna start the reception. Don't miss this one out, because we're gonna have sushi, real sushi. Well, of course, there's probably California roll type of things, but yeah, the sushi. Those of you who don't know, probably most of you know, Miyabi 9 is the sushi restaurant in Iowa. And chef is Japanese, and he has a long history and experience of making sushi in the restaurant. So that's the place. And actually, usually when you are renting a space in a university like this, they have their own catering. With first inside, I had a meeting with this catering management, and it says, please don't tell me that you can make sushi. Just don't. And he says, okay. Everything else you can make, and I can give you a recipe, but don't do that. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks very much for Rob for presenting and being available for questions. And he's sticking around because I'm driving, so he's here for the duration.